Like, I remember the MySpace days. People would be like, you know, they've got their hair like all like this, you know, and they'd be like, okay, here's a guttural tour. This is 7 steps. And I'd be like, back button. That's 6 too many for me. What's up, cool kids of the internet? Mark with Cardivox Academy here, and today I'm very excited because we are doing yet another co-reaction, this time with the awesome Chaney Crabb of Entheos. I'm very excited. We're going to bring her on in a minute here, and we're going to be talking about their new song, Absolute Zero. I'm very pumped. Now, before we get into that, just a little bit, if this is your first video with us, my name is Mark. Again, this is Cardivox Academy. I am a metal vocalist myself. We released an album called Liminal Right on Metal Blade Records back in June. So you can check that out if you want to. And I'm also a full-time vocal coach. I specifically teach people how to do all these, you know, types of sounds safely and efficiently so they don't injure themselves and, you know, they meet their vocal goals and all that. If you like the content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you really like the content, check us out on Patreon. You can hang out with us in Discord. And I probably forgot something, but as many of you know, I'm 1 month into being a new dad, so I'm forgetting everything and I'm just constantly exhausted. So we're just gonna go with it. We're gonna go with it. Let's go ahead and after a strategic YouTube pause, pull in Chaney. Here we go. Boom. Chaney, how's it going? Good to see you.
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, thank you for making some time. I appreciate it. I know that you are Central, so it's goodness, it's after 9 p.m. So yeah, definitely thank you for making the time. I'm excited to check out the new song. I'm excited to talk to you about your vocals. Obviously, I've heard Entheos many times, so I'm really excited to kind of dig in. Actually, I remember the first video or time I even heard your voice was that. It was that cover you did. It's the band that does It's Not Safe to Swim Today.
Veil of Maya.
Veil of Maya. Yeah, and you're in that room. And I remember it was actually, I believe, my bandmate Nico. He's like, dude, you got to check this out. And I was like, holy shit, those vocals are fucking sick.
That's
so
amazing.
Being able to actually talk to you. Yeah, being able to actually talk to you is gonna be awesome. It's gonna be fun. So very, very excited. Now, this is something I ask every guest on the channel, and we'll see what your answer is. But do you want to give me a little bit of background, a little bit of, you know, heads up on what to anticipate with this song here? Or am I, as most people make me do, going to go in absolutely blind? What do you think?
I want you to go in blind. I want you to experience it the way that, you know, anyone else out there is going to experience it. Yeah, I want to hear what you think about it without any preconceived notions.
What if I hate it though? That's the question.
That's,
you know,
hey man, that's what happens when you put music or art out into the world, right? Some people love it, some people hate it. That's how it goes. So you very well might hate this.
I've been called a terrible rock singer many times, so I know what you mean. But I don't think I will. I've not hated an Entheos song yet, so I don't think I'm gonna hate it.
Awesome.
All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead. Let's start it up. And then for all of you, again, this may be your first time. I'm going to pause this song a lot. So if you don't like the pausing, you're in the wrong spot. I do what I want. But anyways, let's go ahead. Let's check out Absolute Zero. Here we go. All right, we already got to talk about.
Oh.
We already got to talk about.
Right.
Damn, that intro is that. Like this is gonna be sick. If that's like the tone of the song, I can guarantee I'm gonna like it. So first of all, amazing. One thing I really love about your voice is the tone of your screams. Right? It's like oftentimes one goal we have as vocalists is to get really even distortion, and your distortion has like that perfect like TV static like sound. But
thank you.
It doesn't like, it doesn't like, it doesn't lose anything in like depth. There's a lot of width to your tone. There's low end. So I want to hear from you. I'm kind of curious. One of the questions I get the most frequently is like, what should a healthy scream feel like? So with that awesome even tone you have, what does that distortion feel like when you're doing your screams? Or does it really feel like much at all? What do you think?
God, what does it feel like? Hold on, let me do one and see what it feels. It feels kind of, I mean, it just, it doesn't like feel, it feels pretty neutral. I don't know. I'm just doing a vocal and it feels like I'm kind of aiming a little further in my throat than I do on other screams, or like something's coming from here where sometimes it comes from here. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
But I don't know. And so do you mean in like a physical, it feels like a scream, I guess. I don't really know how else to put it. That's like,
yeah, I know it's kind of it's inherently kind of a vague question. And, you know, honestly, a lot of the time we don't go through our lives being like, you know, like thinking about like, well, of course, vocalists do, but, you know, oftentimes we don't go through our lives thinking about like all the tiny things that we feel. So to give you kind of an example, because this is a question I have to answer very, very frequently with my students, one thing I always describe is that many healthy screams feel sort of like marbles or something like rolling around underneath like a velvet cloth. Like there's motion, there's rumble, there's movement, but it's soft. It's not like scratchy or pokey or stabbing in any way. So that's usually how I would describe it, depending on the type of vocal that they're doing. And then there are other things as well, like, you know, you can feel the actual activation down here.
Right.
Generally not the best. Back here, a lot of times we get like that soft palate rumble going, which most often is what we're aiming for. Where do you tend to, and like, by the way, if you're like, Mark, I don't fucking know, like, know. Just, that's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Because sometimes people ask me about my vocals and I'm like, well, I don't know. But where would you say, if you had to pinpoint like the TV static feeling is, where would you say that's sort of sitting?
It's right here. It's right about here. The marble thing that you're describing is right here in my throat.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Nice. Now, with that being said, sorry, like that makes me just want to like ask you a million more questions, but we've got a song to listen to and everything like that. But that being said, does it feel, when you are doing one of your vocals, does it feel like this? I'm trying to think of how to ask this without getting too far in the weeds. Does it feel like scratchiness on your actual vocal folds, or does it feel kind of like above that space?
It feels a little above it, I guess.
Like if
yeah, it doesn't. I mean, there's no scratchiness. I guess that's
sure.
So it's like right up here, I guess.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, that sound is the one that you're doing now. It's a really awesome, fundamental, very nicely balanced false chord vocal. Is that kind of where you started with your vocals, or did you start more with highs,
I don't even remember where I started. I've been doing vocals for 20 years, so it's like I don't really remember what I started doing. I'm assuming that what I started doing was really not the right thing to do, but over time, I mean, you know, over time you learn and develop your voice a little more. So I really cannot tell you where I started, but I just started, you know, I was just like imitating the vocalists that I liked, and I was 13 years old. So it's like, it's hard to remember.
Yeah, no, I mean, my first memory of vocals was honestly like doing a bunch of stuff that was very uncomfortable. And then I was listening to Abigail Williams in my mom's Buick LeSabre, and then it just sort of didn't hurt and made sense. And I was like, oh, I guess that's the right thing to do. That's where I should be. So that totally makes sense. In 20 years, good golly. I knew that you'd been doing vocals for a pretty long time, but I didn't know it'd been that long. That's
a really long time. And you know, when I was starting out with vocals, there weren't people like you. There was nothing on the internet. There was barely an internet. You know, I started before I joined MySpace. I mean, you know, it was like there wasn't anything like that going on. So back when I started doing vocals, it was very much kind of each man for himself, his or herself. And there was like the zen of screaming. You know, Melissa Cross was had that out. But other than that, it was kind of just like try, fail, try again, get better over time. And then, you know, people like you started coming along, and then now you can kind of learn on the internet precisely what you're doing. But that wasn't a thing when I started, so it was trial and error for a long time.
Oh, I remember those days. Vocals were very much like a Wild West.
Yeah.
Like I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know the terms false chord or fry scream for a really long time, probably till I got to college. I just thought different people sounded different with their screams, and that was kind of how it went. Totally. And then I like learned all these extra terms, and I was like, oh God, this is a much bigger world. Then
you learn extra terms, and you start to hear like when people are really, really not doing it the right way, and when it kind of hurts. You know, knowing now, you're like, oh no, it kind of hurts hearing your voice. Like I can tell you're ripping those chords up.
Oh, I know. And like there have been times when I've done videos on the channel and I'm like, I don't want to like make this person mad, but like I just gotta, you know, I gotta like point out like one or two things.
Yeah.
But you know, you have found your way, and I guess we should listen to more of the song here because there's gonna be a lot more things to talk about. But you have found your way to like one of, I think, just the most like balanced and even and controlled tones that I think is currently out there. And I totally mean that.
Thank you.
Even with a lot of other bands, like you listen to the music and you hear little voice cracks or voice breaks, which like for me, I don't care. It's like, you know what, you're in front of the mic, you're doing your thing, so you automatically get props from me. But I like don't hear any of that from me, which is really impressive. But we can talk about that in a bit. I guess we'll go back to the song here. But for all the viewers, I want you to listen to the tone, and I want you to notice how you almost never hear any like uncontrolled waver. You never hear any of that sort of like jerky airflow. And in fact, that's probably what I'll ask you about next. But I guess let's jump back into the song. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Hell yeah, let's do it. Also, I love the vibe. Just like the sort of like red hazy vibe looks really cool.
Thank you.
Here we go. That's it. That's the spot. That's the spot where you got to pause, because that's exactly like if that's not the perfect segue towards breath control, like I don't know what is. Like a long held out low. So yeah, I want to kind of ask you about your airflow, because like not many people, some people do, like, you know, it seems kind of counterintuitive to like my job, but some people are totally able to self-teach and they don't need my help. It's just a fact, right? Not many people I know find their way to that level of breath control like by accident. They're either self-teaching themselves with some material, or they have a coach. I've even had students who have come to me and they've got like, you know, performance degrees and they're classically trained, and their airflow is not that even, you know? So talk to me about, I guess, like, let me think of a more specific question to make your life easier. Because the vague questions, it's just like, well, what do you mean? When you are doing these long held out screams, do you feel like there's a lot of pressure in your vocal system, or does it kind of feel like you're opening your mouth, pushing a little bit, and sound is just sort of coming out of you nice and steadily? Yeah,
that scream in particular, it's the second thing that you described. It's a very like, the sound is just coming out of me nice and steady. It's like my tongue is pressed up against the roof of my mouth, and it's like a, fuck, hold on. It's just, you know, that. So it's that's one of the, like, I would say quieter things that I do, because I'm very much like I have like a kind of like loud, aggressive, like hardcore type metal vocal. I don't know like what it is, but yeah, that's one of the quieter vocals I do, and it's just I honestly feel like I'm resting during that part. Like we've played the song live.
Yeah.
On the last couple of tours that we've done, and that part is a restful place for me. I feel very, you know, I can kind of take a breather from all of the patterns that I just did and all of the like breath control that I was doing before that. But to answer your question about breath control, that is something that I tend to write hard patterns, and live I work out my breathing, because playing live is so different than being in the studio, because then your adrenaline is pumping in a crazy way and you're trying to like run around and keep up with a crowd. So it's very different than being in the studio in a controlled environment where all of your you can just really meditate on your vocal patterns and your breathing. So it's like two different monsters for me.
Yeah. Now that's actually really good. That leads me to a really, really good question. So when you're writing and, listening to your songs, I often think to myself like, damn, that's not easy. There's all these like galloping sort of polyrhythmic patterns going on. Sometimes like very staccato and sharp, like coming in like between cymbal hits and stuff, very like surgically. And so I hadn't thought about this, but do you write your vocal sections thinking about that, like thinking about like, okay, that was really crazy, I'm going to make sure I have like a really restful spot, I'm going to make sure I have a restful guttural, so to speak? Or is it kind of like you said, you more so figure it out as you go?
Yeah, I figure it out as I go. I mean, I strictly play to the music. Like, so if there are 5 parts that I think call for really crazy patterns in a row, then that's what I'm going to go for. Like I'm going off of feel. I'm not really thinking of how hard the song is going to be to perform in the long run. So I'll often do things in the studio that I have not yet, learned how to do really well in a live environment. And that's what I practice for like a month, 2 months before we do tours, just because I don't want those parts to come across as if I can't. I want them to come across as surgically done live as they sound in the studio. I don't want to not be able to replicate what I do live, but I do write parts often that are a little above what I what I might feel totally comfortable doing in the moment, but I'm going to learn how to do it no matter what. So yeah, no, I don't write with like, all right, I'm going to take it easy here because I just went really hard here. Oftentimes it's, all right, I'm just going to keep going really hard and we're going to see how this will pan out in the long run. I'm really going to be hating myself on stage, but whatever.
Yeah. No, that's impressive, because I'm going to be honest. I'll totally put myself out there. I have done that before. I've done that, like, which is kind of funny because we haven't played live since like 2016.
Wow.
But I have done that before, and I still do that because, like, hey, you never know. Maybe we'll hit up a festival or something.
Totally.
But I will sometimes do that, where I'm just like, man, this was like a really big section, and this section's kind of down tempo anyway. So this is where I'll take a sip of water, or like this is where I'll just kind of like recenter or something like that. So that's impressive that you're just like, nah, fuck it, I'm just gonna do whatever the hell I want and make it work. That's pretty cool.
Well, at the same time, I'm envy your way, because that would be. Probably I would be taking a little easier on myself, and I think that also is good. But everyone, there's a method to everyone's madness, and so
yeah. Well, I appreciate it. For me, it's just like I always tell people, I'm very open with this. I'm a lazy piece. Like I always like, that's actually how I developed like my whole like vocal sound, my whole voice. It wasn't like, oh, I want to be Fry, I want to be false chord. I was just like, that sounds cool, and it doesn't take a lot of work. Like, I remember the MySpace days. People would be like, they've got their hair like all like this, and they'd be like, okay, here's a guttural tour. This is 7 steps, and I'd be like, back button. That's 6 too many for me. I'm just like, no.
I kind of learned. I learned the same way as well. I didn't do the like, I'm gonna take it easy on myself, but. Like I said, no one was talking about false and fry screams back in the day. It's in the last couple of years. Tons of people will ask me, what do you use, false or fry scream? And we just weren't thinking about that then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't a thing. And to be honest with you, that's something that I feel like sometimes, again, this seems kind of like counterintuitive, since I literally giving vocal lessons is like my main job. That's my main way of earning a living. sometimes I think there's something a little bit lost because most people who come to me, not all, but most people who come to me, they're like, I desperately want to be a fry vocalist. And I'm like, okay, let's work on that. And then I always tell them, I'm like, this is going to be our goal because that's my job, helping you reach your goals safely. But I want you to be open to, if you accidentally do a false chord and it sounds cool, maybe we just follow your voice.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of that?
I mean, that's I think that's a super important thing in developing your own voice and sounding unique is take all of these tools. I love learning stuff on the internet now it's available to me, and I love learning things from kids who are way younger than me who are coming up with like new stuff to do. But I think that I look at all of it as like paint for my palette. Like I just want it all in my toolbox, and then you can bring it all in to songs when they call for them. And I really like to base my writing on like the emotional, like the emotions behind the music. That's really what I'm drawn to. And I think that if the more techniques that you have under your belt, the more you're going to be able to service the music that you're playing to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like a lot of times people, I don't know, like maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree. But as a metal vocalist, I like honestly view myself as kind of being more of like a support role. Like if there was a D&D, like if it was a D&D party, I would not be the tank and I would not be the DPS. I'd be the person kind of, coming in later and being like, okay, like what does the party need? Because that's kind of how it works. I listen to the song and I'm like, okay, the song is asking for low vocals here. The song is asking for clean singing here. And I just answer that question accordingly. Do you feel kind of the same way? Or are you like, no, I do feel more of like, the front and the face of the band?
No, I absolutely feel like that. I think that vocals are a nice, it's like the bow on a gift that makes it just so beautiful and well presented and put together. And it's the thing that kind of like brings the whole package together. You don't you want to service the music that you're playing, and I very much come from that realm as well.
Sure, I think you do a good job, honestly, and because I'll mention this and then we can get back to the song. But I think one thing that I have experienced and I hear a lot when I listen to metal. Obviously, metal is my job. I love metal, right? But one I think area where metal can be kind of weak. Ooh, this is going to bring in the spicy comments. One area where I think metal can be kind of weak is being able to bring emotion into like such a maximal style, especially like very techie, very like polyrhythmic stuff, because it's so like mathematical that sometimes that like structure, but like you do it very well here. And I've never listened to Entheos and thought like, that was cool, kind of emotionless, but trust me, I've listened to many metal bands where I did feel that way. So I'm gonna put a pin in that actually because I want to ask you about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're picking up on that. But yeah, let's.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I'll tell you one thing. Like anybody listening to Entheos for the first time, like I just want you to focus on how intentionally placed, well, like everything is, but the vocals, like where the highs are coming in, the way that sometimes you'll like skip, do a triplet, hold something out, like it never comes across as unintentional. Where sometimes I'm sure you've heard the deathcore bands where the band is doing something and then the vocalist is just kind of off time.
Oh, totally. I was actually just talking to someone. Sorry to prolong this, but I was talking to someone about this yesterday. Like, I remember when I was young, I heard Randy Blythe, right? Like a lot of people did. And one thing that Randy does really well is he makes every part of a song the focal point. Whereas I felt like a lot of vocalists, like it would just kind of be like bullshit and then the catchy part. Does that make sense? Like it's a bunch of noises and then the catchy part. So he really inspired me, and like hardcore really inspired me to try to make every part like just thought out and have intention behind every part and make every part have its own like special character and catchiness, because I don't want people to be waiting until the end of a song or like a certain point in a song where the catchy part happens and that's like the, I just like when the entire song has that feeling going on.
I'm with you 100%. And I think the technique, or the word that I think of, or the phrase that I think of, is technique salad. It's just kind of like, you know, how much can I fit into a small space? You know, who I think is really good at what you're describing? Brian Garris. Brian Garris of Knocked Loose, I think is. Oh, I think he's phenomenal, and he has, like, you know, he does lows sometimes, but he has mostly that one technique, but he makes every moment a moment.
Totally. I think there are a lot of like more hardcore type bands who they do stuff like that. Like Scott Vogel, Terror is a huge influence of mine, and you know, Terror songs are fucking catchy. You hear them one time and you're like, it's stuck in your head whether you like it or not, and I love that. And I honestly, I think Corpse Grinder is really good at that. Like, catchy parts. I love when songs, when it's not, I don't want to go in like over amazing musicians' instrumentals and like just make random noises for no reason. And then, you know, I really like there to be, I really think out every single part. I like there to be intention behind every part, like I said. And yeah.
That, you know, I'm going to ask you another question, which, I mean, every time I do one of these co-reactions, people always mention that their favorite parts are the digressions and where we get off track. So, like, don't even worry about it. Cool. You know, but, actually, that makes me curious about your writing process, because, you know, one thing that I think is so interesting, because obviously being a vocalist, there's doing the vocals, right? There's making the sound. Right. And then there's also the process of cooperating with a song. There's the process of knowing how to convey your message. And the writing process is a big part of that. So do you write like your vocal lines by yourself? Do you have your band there with you? What's your process like?
I do most of it by myself. And then Naveen, who is the drummer of the band, writes all the music, produces, you know, writes all the guitar and stuff. He's also my fiance. So Naveen and I work very closely together. I go in with a ton of ideas and know most of what I'm going to do. But in the studio, there are some parts where I'll write a part and Naveen will be like, I think it would be a little catchier if you did it like a little more staccato, or a little more like channel like Freight Train from Origin in this part a little more, because that's how he envisioned it. Because, you know, he writes all of the music, so he has an idea of the vocal that he wants to hear over certain parts. And most of the time it's just me writing by myself and coming up with the patterns, all like that. But sometimes Naveen will have input when we're in the studio together, which I really enjoy, because there's parts that just come out better because he, you know, said what he would enjoy more. And I really believe in serving the material in the best way possible. And sometimes my idea is not the best idea, and there's something else that would serve the part better.
Oh, I fully agree with that. And there have been times where I think I've just got the best idea ever, and then Nico, our guitarist, he'll basically be like, hey, try my idea. And I'll be honest, sometimes I get a little defensive. Sometimes I'm like,
of course.
Yeah. But, you know, because, you know, that's just kind of what happens sometimes. But then I try his idea and it sounds so much better, and I realize my idea was kind of horseshit, and I'm like, damn.
Totally. I think that's important to just try everything. Just try it all. Like, if someone else thinks that a part is going to sound better, try the part out, because you're never going to know until you put it over the material and try it.
Yeah. So we actually, in Kardashev, we have what we call like the 3 commandments of Kardashev. And that's one of them is you can always put it back. Meaning, like, if you just try it because you can Control Z, right? There's, you can always put it back. Never be afraid to write a shitty song. And then if it sounds good, it is good. Those are the 3
Love
rules.
Those. I'm going to steal those from you. Kardashev, now the Entheos commandments. Because you know, the best one for us has always been, if it sounds good, it is good, because sometimes you can get into such analysis paralysis of like, oh well, should it be like, you know, kick snare or snare kick, or you know, should it be a slide or a staccato run, and then after a while you just have to be like, okay, does this sound cool? Yes. All right, totally,
we're moving on.
You know what else I would add to that is like the Occam's razor idea, that the simplest thing may be the best. Like, the first thing that you think of is oftentimes the best thing. No matter, I mean, dude, I've come up with like I've had demo vocals that I just thought, I don't know about that, but I'll try to change it like 15 times, and the first one always sounds the best. So I would add that to the commandments. Fourth commandment.
That's a good one. That's good. So the fourth commandment. Let's make that one. What would you call that if you were to sum that up into like a catchy phrase? What would that be?
God, I don't...
Go with your gut, maybe.
Go with your gut.
Maybe?
I mean, it's like they tell you that when you're taking a test in school. You know, a lot of the time, the first answer that you come up with is the right answer.
Yeah. You could do what I did because I was not a very good student. I would just like draw cool designs in the poem. Yeah.
You can try that too.
I did that a lot. For anybody out there who's still in school, don't do that. Don't take it.
Or do that. Drop out of school, go on tour, man. Start a metal band come on.
I mean, okay, if you're gonna do something cool, then absolutely, absolutely. But if you're gonna be like a surgeon or something that like you actually have to stay in school, like okay. Maybe. I mean, I dropped out of school to start a band. I'm not lying, I did. So
that's awesome. So did my fiance did that as well, and it's working out well for both of you. So I think, hey,
it's going. Hey, so mote it be, right? Well, let's go ahead. Let's get back to the song because I do want to talk about your highs in a bit, and I'm sure I like that this is a good chunky song. I think it's over 4 minutes runtime, which is nice. It gives us a lot to talk about.
Pog.
Yeah, let's keep going. Let's see where this takes us. Cool. Pog, hell yeah. Okay, I'm going to pause it there because I can tell something cool is happening, and I don't want to pause it in the middle of the cool part.
Okay.
So a couple just observations I want to make. Just I don't really have anything to dig into them unless you just want to add, but I just thought it was cool. So anybody who watches this channel knows about me that I'm not the biggest fan of guitar solos, but that one was actually really cool, and I'll tell you why. So I'm not just saying that. Yeah. First and foremost, like he was obviously shredding, but I feel like so many guitar solos, it's just like I know scales, and listen, I can't play guitar, so I'm not gonna like shit on anybody for that. But sometimes I'm just like, we all know what an arpeggio is. But he was starting, he was stopping. There was a lot of cool stuff going on, and I really liked how it wasn't just like guitar solo stops. Now you're screaming. There was like a shift in the song. We got more ambient. We got a little bit more melodic. Then you were sort of punching in between sections. That was really cool. It made it feel like chunky but not blocky. So that's all I have. I just thought compositionally y'all played together really, really well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey,
just to add to that, I could say we wholeheartedly agree with that. Scales are awesome. Hearing them as solos in every song can get a little it's just not always my thing, and I really enjoy Naveen's playing for that. He tends to float in and out of different, I don't know guitar language, but he's like, I think that it's called multi-scale, I guess.
Let's just say it is.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
Hey, we're the experts here. It's multi-scale. Why not?
Two vocalists talking about guitar stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was super awesome. And obviously, we heard some of that interplay because the guitar would calm down. You would jump in with a couple quick phrases. The guitar would pick back up after you lean back. So that was really cool. I want to talk about the highs though, because I absolutely love your high vocals. And I will tell you why.
Thank you.
First, I often hear high vocals are like if somebody was like, Mark, you can only do and listen to one type of metal vocal for the rest of your life, I might pick highs because there's just it's also maybe because I love black metal.
Yeah.
I'm a big black metal fan,
Awesome.
so maybe that's part of the reason why as well. But oftentimes I hear highs and I love them, but they lack a little bit of resonant presence because they're a little bit pinched, right?
Yeah.
You can hear the person, even though maybe there's no audible pitch. It's not necessarily a pitch. Every scream has pitch, but maybe it's not like an audible pitch, right? You can hear that they've got this sort of like
Totally.
in the back of their throat. Yeah. And with you, I just hear so much access of like this masky, resonant, heavily twangy space, right? But without constriction, which tells me that you're doing it entirely with mouth shape, right? Obviously your larynx is probably lifting to a degree and things like that.
Sure.
So I kind of want to just, now this is kind of broadly open-ended, but I just kind of want to ask you about your approach to high vocals, because that's one of the first things that stood out to me with your voice, is that they are piercing, yet they are relaxed, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, what's your approach to them?
As far as approach, I don't really know. High vocals were the things that came the most naturally to me in the first place. So I guess that my approach with all vocals is just that I am trying to be a vocalist for as long as possible, and a screaming vocalist for as long as possible. So I've always worked to do the thing that feels the best with my throat, with what's going on. Also, from the time I was a kid, like, I didn't know anything about recording and reverb and all of that stuff. So I always wanted my voice to just resonate in that way. So that was something that I worked toward a lot when I was a kid, just experimenting with different things that I could do with my throat. So that was really my initial approach to high vocals. And then over time, I just started, imitating other people who did high vocals. Trevor Strnad was a huge influence for me. Or Frederick Thorndahl actually is a huge influence for me on vocals. He has this solo album called Soul Niger Within. And rumor has it that I heard from the drummer Morgan Ogren, who is on that album. He said that he believes Frederick is the vocalist of on Soul Niger Within. So those high vocals, that's a huge influence for me as well. And they just sound like natural and piercing and not to struggle, I guess. So that's really where I come from on doing those. I just want something that's powerful and loud and pierces, but doesn't hurt me.
Sure. Hey, I can resonate with that. So that's an amazing answer. That's a lot of insight. I appreciate it. So there's something I ask a lot of vocalists to do, and it's kind of funky, but it would be very cool if we heard a high vocal, and you can totally be like, Mark, I don't want to do that. And I'll be like, okay, sorry. But if we heard a vocal, and I'll show you what I mean, and then what you do is you pull back on the volume, but you hang on to the distortion, because that's a really cool way. It's not foolproof, but it's a cool way of seeing like the foundational level of that distortion, right? So for example, if I was to do this, let me step back a little bit. If I was to do this,
Okay.
That's what my vocal, obviously that's not what it sounds like when I get in front of the mic, but that vocal, that's where it all starts.
Okay.
And then I lean on that. So if you want to give that a try, it's always super cool to see where we land.
Yeah, I'll back up too. Is that it? Did I do that correctly?
Yeah,
or do you want me to do it longer?
So it's you know what? Let's just do it again because it was cool.
All right.
So it's interesting. You're landing on a very similar sound to the sound that like Dickie Allen landed on, which is sort of like Bart Simpson-y type of noise.
Totally.
It sounds like you. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly
what you
mean. Sometimes I hear my voice and I'm like, that sounds a little like Simpson-esque.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I straight up do. I purposefully try to channel Kermit the Frog when I do my low vocals, 100%.
Oh, yeah?
Because if I take like a basic false chord, right, kind of old school, and then I do like a Kermit the Frog here. Let's say Kermit the Frog was doing a false chord low. It kind of transforms the sound, right? When you drop down onto that distortion, right, when you pulled that back, where did that rumble feel like it was sitting. It sounded like right behind the tongue, but I've been known to be wrong before.
Yeah, it is
talk
right
to me about
behind.
that.
It's honestly a little higher than behind the tongue. It's like, yeah. So it's kind of like, yeah. It's like, I don't know. It feels a tiny bit higher than the tongue, I guess.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's interesting. I have to say I was a little bit wrong. I have to, which, you know, I'm always very, very, very free to admit. I always thought that your high vocals were a lot more Fry influenced, but what you're describing there, most people describe as being under like the false chord umbrella, where basically the folds in the back of our mouth are sort of like cinching up and they're vibrating, and we're getting a lot of distortion from there along with the other tissues above the vocal folds. So that's not to say there's like no Fry tone going on, but it sounds like the tone, like the tonality of your voice, the pitch in your voice is happening entirely separately from the distortion, which is, I mean, if you're feeling your distortion up here and your vocals are down here, that's a far degree of separation. So I got a little bit of what I didn't expect, which is always kind of fun. That's cool. And
I'm learning a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, you know, one of the best things that you can do, especially, is like, that's one of the types of screams, because it's very similar. It's very similar to what I do. I don't have that tonality under it though. Although hearing your vocals now, I'm like, man, now I'm gonna want to try to put that tonality under there just for fun. One thing you can do with this scream is you can actually kind of see a little bit of like the distortion mechanism, because we do get some distortion from, I always get the names confused, palatopharyngeal folds, right, coming up like this, and you can actually see them kind of cinching together and creating a narrow opening. You can see them kind of at the base sort of rattling around. I show that to my students a lot. So, you know, you can, there's a way we could do it here, but you get the cell phone out and you look in the mirror and you go, and you can kind of see it rolling around. It's kind of fun. But yeah, very, very steady. Oh, I had another question I wanted to ask you about the high vocals. Oh, so for most people, high vocals are not what come easy. They're what came easy for me as well. I don't know why. But high vocals are not what really kind of comes naturally. It's really difficult for a lot of people. So I wanted to know specifically, especially for the benefit of anybody watching watching this video, which thank you for anybody who's made it all 43 minutes. What kind of, do you do any sort of specific warm-ups? I have some. Do you do any specific warm-ups or any sort of specific thing to get yourself into that high space? Or do you just kind of roll out of bed, walk to the mic, and go for it?
I'll sing a little bit and I'll do some vocals, but that's really my warm-up. That's what I've found to be the most beneficial to me. You know, I've like followed a lot of different warm-up tutorials that I've seen and done a lot of stuff like that, but really just warming up with screaming and singing and drinking water and chewing sugar-free gum. That's my warm-up.
Chewing sugar-free gum. What do you? I've never heard that one. What do you feel like that? Is it just kind of like a mental thing, or do you maybe like it releases like some tension in your jaw? What do you feel like the gum is doing for you? That's interesting. Yeah,
you know, this is fascinating because one of our first tours was with Goat Whore, and I got really sick on that tour. And I think it was my second tour, so I was still kind of like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm sick. This is going to ruin everything. And Ben was like, you got to chew sugar-free gum. It'll help you. And the sugar-free gum just coated my throat in a way that it just really improved my vocals. It's almost like what you imagine that throat coat tea would do when you hear the name. Or I've heard of people describing like drinking pop will help them in that way. And pop has been okay for me, but just there's nothing like gum that really kind of coats my throat in the way that you want a cough drop or a tea to do. It's like a thick, it almost feels like a thick mucus blanket.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely heard of things like that before, like people creating like that sensation of like the mucus blanket. And the fact, like, okay, first of all, I'm going to say this and it's going to sound spicy, but it's not. Like, you literally should do whatever works for you as long as it's not causing you damage. Like, if you like chewing that, like chew that sugar-free gum like crazy. I can't think of the word, the factualness of those types of things, it can be a little bit hazy, but you know, at the same time, like I think that's one of those areas where like I said, if it helps you, go for it. For me, if I am going to be doing studio time, I have horrible acid reflux. So if I start chewing gum, it's over. Oh, yeah. It's over for me. You know, it's donezo. So that's interesting. That's interesting.
Totally. I think that's, you know, that's the different thing about bodies. Our instrument is so different from other instruments because it's from within. It's our actual body, and everyone's body is so drastically different that it's so hard to explain to another person or to expect another person to, like, you know, this works for me and this, because everyone is so different. It's not like a guitar where they're making thousands of the same model and you can do like pretty much the same thing to make it work. It's everyone is so drastically different, and everyone's vocals are so drastically different, and their body composition. And so, yeah, different stuff works for everyone. I've heard of people chewing garlic cloves, and that's the best thing for them. And what? I mean, that's,
wow.
There's no way that's going to help me, but I tried it just to see, maybe it would. You know, I think everything's worth trying just to see what you settle on. That's your best thing.
Sure. Like, were these garlic cloves like roasted, or was it just like straight?
Dude, it was straight.
Garlic clove.
It's straight. One garlic clove. Well, and I tried it, and it made me like, it knocked all of the mucus out of me from my nose. Okay. And I felt like I was going to puke. It was just awful.
I do have one thing that I just remembered from your story that I did, and it did help. So we were going to play, it was just a smaller local show. I don't even remember who we played with. But this was early on, and I was just so congested, and I felt like I was just full of like gunk, you know, that feeling. And so what I did was, I had gotten sushi, and there was this big dollop of wasabi. So I took it and I just put it in my mouth, swished it around. It was disgusting, but like all of that stuff knocked out. And then I had I felt great. Vocals were great that day. So, you know, totally. stuff like that can help. I want to actually add on to something you said though, because that was very intuitive. You know, everybody's body composition is different. Another thing, and I have really experienced this through teaching, that's different is people's relationship with their bodies, right? Yeah. I have had so many students who growing up, it was like one of those things where your parents, like, it's like your parents don't want to hear you. You know what I mean? Speak only when spoken to. And, you know, this is totally understandable. Even helping them do something like, you know, hey, is a huge task. So I think that's something that is really important to keep in mind as well, especially if you're learning vocals and you're having a hard time. You know, it may be worth, like, you know, just kind of making a bunch of goofy noises and seeing what it feels like. You know, what does it feel like when I'm like, you know, what does it feel like when I'm like, ooh, you know, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Because that can really get, I mean, I don't know about you, but I still make a lot of really stupid noises around. My wife, she can tell you all about it. But I still will I'll walk around the house and I'll be like, I wonder how this would sound. Like, do hee ho hee ho hee ho. And then I just try to do a vocal with like some of that going on. I do a lot of that. So I don't know, maybe
I do too. I make the weirdest noises all the time. I'm always like, oh, I wonder what this would sound like, or if I'm just constantly making gross, weird noises around the house. But that's how you expand the thing. That's how I've always done it. You know, I used to do it with my parents around, and now I do it in my own house. So it's always been a thing.
Well, good. I mean, it's super helpful. All right, let's go ahead. Let's keep going. Actually, I'm going to go back a little bit because we had a lead up, and I like oftentimes the big moment, and I could be wrong. Like maybe we don't have a big moment. Maybe you're sitting there and you're like, what an idiot. But it sounds like there's a big moment coming, and oftentimes big moments are all about the lead in. So I'm going to go back right around here. Here we go. I hear something cool there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple things. Number one, I didn't notice this the first time, but I really love how the highs in that section are panned. I love the way that they're panned.
Thank you.
Like it's like, to me, and like I don't know anything about audio production, right? So feel free to be like, that's wrong, Mark. I'll be like, sorry. But it sounds like fairly hard panned, right?
Yep.
Which definitely, I think that makes a lot of sense for that section too, because you gotta get those high vocals to cut through everything.
Yeah.
So, and it had a cool effect. It was very hard panned and also very, very like, I'm going to say abrasive because it's metal and we know that that's a good term. We know that that's a good thing, but it was very like abrasive and attention getting. Also, I'm really glad, nothing against breakdowns. I'm really glad it wasn't a breakdown. That's what I was expecting. And if it was a breakdown, it would have been cool. I would have loved it. But the fact that it went to like, just like full bore, I was like, oh, I love being surprised,
Hell yeah.
So that was really cool. Do I hear, correct me if I'm wrong, do I hear like a layer of like sort of belty clean vocals under the screams here, or am I nuts?
So what you're hearing, I call them pitched vocals. Okay. What you're hearing is, I think it would be, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 layers of pitched vocals. So it's kind of like a vocal that has melody to it.
Yeah.
And I'm really a sucker for those. I love like bands like The Ocean. And I think that the vocalist of The Ocean does that really fucking well. I think also Sam Carter does that really well.
That's what I was thinking. Yep.
Yeah. So I love to employ that because I think that it helps drive the emotion of the song. And I just really, really like those type of vocals. And this felt like the right part to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, especially after that, after that break, and I'm not really drop, but that's just the term that's coming to mind. That section coming in, it's very cool, and I'm glad it's as forward as it is, because sometimes you hear bands and like you can tell that they're going for like some sort of like, oh, let's put another layer under there. I've never been guilty of this. Let's put another layer in there for effect, and then the layer is so drowned out. Everybody's gonna be like, I told you it was too much reverb.
Yeah.
Shutty.
No, yeah, these layers are actually now that I think of it, it's 2 layers of that pitched vocal, and then I think that there's a not pitched vocal on that, and I think that it achieves this like really cool like chorus effect, like if you're putting a chorus pedal on a guitar, say that, yeah, it's just like a cool. I call it, pitched screaming or man singing. I really love it, whatever the hell it is.
Sure. Yeah. When, I find that when it comes to like, I call it a couple things too. Pitch screaming, gritty belting, it kind of depends. It kind of depends on how melodic I think the vocalist is trying to be. Like, Kublai Khan, I'm going to call it more gritty belting, Architects, I'm going to call it more gritty singing, right? Even those terms are a little too broad, but I find that this is a very easy style to blow out your voice with. The times, because one thing I find that sometimes people who are vocal professionals try to hide the fact that they've had vocal injuries. I have totally blasted. It's been a long time, but back before I knew what I was doing, I blasted my vocal muscles bad a couple times. Oh yeah. Well, you want to sound cool. And it was actually my first time practicing with my band, because I'd never been in a band before, and they had all been in like local bands, and I was like, I gotta be cool. So I just, as hard as I could, right? And
sorry to interrupt you on that, but I think
continue.
that another way that vocalists do that, and I always like any person who plays live, because if you're a vocalist and you're not playing with in-ears, you're relying on stage sound, and you're often times trying to overcompensate for not being able to hear yourself at all. So you're trying to scream over cymbals, like hearing cymbals behind you and cabs on stage, and then you can hear like your voice coming out of this tiny little stage monitor that's right in front of you. So I think that in-ears, if you're playing live, that's like a must-have, because not only will you be able to hear yourself and you're probably never going to blow out your voice again, but you're going to then be able to further manipulate your voice in a live environment, because you actually know what you're doing, because you can hear every little detail of your voice. It's like hearing your own vocals way louder than anything else. You know, you can mess with your mix and get your vocal mix to be absolutely perfect. You can put as much reverb or delay and you can program whatever you want on there. And it's just such a really helpful tool in not doing that. And yeah, like what you're saying, you played with a band, you're trying to be cool and scream over the band and have all this energy, and then you end up blowing out your voice. And it happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, you know, I sometimes will talk with people, you know, who are playing and they'll say like, oh yeah, we don't use the in-ear monitors, and like in my head I'm like, why though? Like why? And the thing is, like, you can get, maybe they're not going to be the in-ear monitors that you carry throughout your entire career, but like you can get, just like to start, you can get a set for like $200, $150, which I'm not saying that $200 is easy for everybody to get. But you know, like your band can pitch in, make it work, you save up your money. They are invaluable. I remember the first time I used in-ear monitors, I was like, oh my God, I did not know the clarity that I was missing out on.
I know. I feel like that.
Great call out.
I feel like that's the first day I did vocals on stage, you know, as in I was like born again as a vocalist when I started using in-ears.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so anybody, and you know, sometimes I talk to people who like think they're above in-ear mod. It's like when I talk to people who they're like, oh, I never use a click track. I'm like, why would you not just do something that makes your life easier? Like I can guarantee, go ahead.
Well, you know, it's like, it's the same thing as is behind the theory that if you're using triggers, you're a cheater and it's going to like make your drums way better. It's like, no. That is not how that works. Triggers, honestly, I think they make drummers who aren't clean sound worse, because then you can actually hear what's going on and you can tell if they have popcorn feet because their triggers will oftentimes be so loud. You know what I mean? Like a click track, I think that people look at it as maybe like cheating, or that bands are going to sound too robotic if they use a click track for some reason. And that is just not the case. It just makes you cleaner, and it makes it so your band doesn't train wreck, because if someone falls off, you can just keep going. It's just there as like a comfort to know that you're in time with the rest of your band. And I think that more often than not, especially in the type of music that we play, in a more technical like type of metal, and you know, when we're trying to nail these parts perfectly, a click track is a great thing. It's a great thing to have in your ear to just fall back on. I have one going in my ears at all times, but I only really notice that it's there when if I fall off, or if there's a part like the part we were just listening to where the musicians are quiet and I'm the only one doing vocals. It helps me know that I'm on time, and that, you know, when there's like a breakdown or something like that, if you're on time, then when you come back in, that vocal is so much more impactful because you're perfectly in time with the rest of your band. And a lot of what is so cool about breakdowns and vocalists coming in on breakdowns is nailing that part with razor tight precision.
Yeah. We had our butts saved by click track. Click track's literally like, it was bad. So I'll keep the story brief, but it's a good story. So one of the last shows we played Tech Fest in 2015. And we had just, at that time, well, still really never played a stage like that big. So we didn't think about the fact that our laptop, which was running our backtracks, probably shouldn't have a disk drive because of all the rumble, right? And so what was happening is the stage would rumble, the disc would skip, and then it would come back in. So we had click tracks, and so when the first time that happened, we were a little confused, and then we all started just listening, and so it'd be like 1 2 3 4 2. It would cut out, and in my head I'm like 3 2 3 4 pop, and so we were able to come in with the click tracks. And I mean, it was a fiasco, but at the same time, like it would have been way worse without those. That's like, you know, it's funny. It's like one of the worst shows we've ever played, but it's one of my favorites just because it was like fucking wild.
Totally. And at shows like that, on festival stages, the stages are so big that then it becomes super hard to hear the rest of your band if you're not, if you don't have like in-ears. And so not having a click track, which I guess most of the time, if you have in-ears, you probably you most likely have a click track, maybe not. But like when you're on a stage that far apart from each other, a click track and having in-ears comes in even more handy, because it's really fucking hard to hear a kit that's like 20 feet behind you, 2 guitar players and cabs that are, you know, 20, 30 feet away from you, or however far. I don't know. I'm probably over exaggerating, but that's how far it feels.
Sure.
Especially add on the nerves of playing a festival. You're playing in front, you know, there are a lot of people there. You just, it just feels, it makes me feel so secure to have my click track.
Yeah, I'm with you. Now with this gritty singing, you're going a very melodic route. You know, like we were talking about, it's an area where a lot of people, if they're going to hurt their voice, they hurt it here, because your vocal folds are so engaged simultaneously along with the generation of your distortion, right? And that can be a tricky balance to hit. And the funny thing about it is, it's a lot easier to do than people think, but it's a lot harder to do right than a lot of other styles. So did this come naturally to you? Because I know for me, I don't use it very much in our music, but for me, I really had to work on it. I really had to, and it was funny because I was so comfortable in all my other vocals, even clean singing, but putting the two together, I really had to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, I need to really analyze my process and dig into what I'm doing here. Was it super easy for you, or did you have to kind of work at it as well?
You know, I think that it initially came sort of easy, but I of course had to practice and practice in order to like get it to a point where I thought that it sounded the way that I wanted it to sound. I mean, it's not like I haven't damaged my voice or done anything like that, but it just took a while to get it to a point where I was happy with it. I just,
sure,
you know, it's kind of just like you're wrestling with, not wrestling, but you're experimenting with your voice to see if you can do something. And I don't know if it helped me that, well, I don't really know, you know, I don't know why it came sort of easy to me, but yeah, just.
It's how it works. That's how it works.
Yeah.
You know, with some people, like for you and I, like high vocals came really easy. But for me,
right,
it took me like a year and a half to get a guttural down. No joke.
Yeah. Oh, gutturals were, I mean, God, I couldn't really, I wasn't really happy with a low that I did until at least like a year, 2 years into doing vocals. Like it took me a while. I kind of just, in the first band that I was in, I did highs most of the time, but then it's like I started getting into like the OG deathcore bands back in the day, and I was like, damn, these guys are fucking doing all of this crazy low shit, and now I have to get on that level, you know? So yeah, it just, it took me a while, but yeah, for some reason, I don't know why lows were, or gutturals specifically, were like the thing that took, you know, a while. And I still like to work on all of these vocals all the time. I still like to, like, sure. I never want to stop progressing with the way that any of my vocals sound. And I think that even now I'm, you know, we finished tracking this album, let's see, maybe it was April, March. And even since then, I'm like, I've gotten better in areas, and I'm like, damn, I wish that I could track this now that I've played the songs live a couple of times. But that's just the nature of the beast, and I'll throw it on the next record, and then there's something that I'll wish that I would have known for the next record. It's just going to happen like that forever. But I really, really like to expand my vocal palette all the time. Like, I don't want to be, I'm not like, I don't want to be unwilling to learn anything or to get better at anything. Like, that's just, I just love vocals so much, and I just want to continue to grow on that path, and that's really the name of the game for me.
Yeah, like why get in the way of your own progress? I agree with that. Going back to the gutturals, I can tell you exactly why it was hard for me. I can tell you exactly why it was hard for me. Especially, and a lot of my students as well, is I thought gutturals were here for the longest time. I was like, well, a guttural, that's like a low. And so I was doing my gutturals by like going, ooh, right? And even when I got the sound, it was very uncomfortable. It wasn't until I learned that gutturals, you know, okay, and of course there are always exceptions, but the vast majority of the time, gutturals are here.
Right.
Right. They're in the mouth. And it's funny because like, if you were to talk to a bunch of people who maybe they're not into vocals, they're not into music or anything like that, and you were to ask them, you were to say, hey, which one of these tones is lower? They would be like the second one, but it's the same pitch, right? It's just that there's so much, you're getting into like your vowel formants at that point. And it wasn't until I figured that out that it's all here, that it made a big difference. Absolutely. That was what it was for me.
I honestly think
anyways,
that's probably what it was for me too, because gutturals sound like something that you have to like push, you know, from the depths of hell to do, but it's just all mouth work. Yeah, it's all up here.
Yeah. I've never learned either through teaching myself or going to somebody, because I've gone to vocal coaches too. I've never learned something where part of the process wasn't realizing that I was working too hard. Every single vocal technique I've ever learned and perfected, there was a point where I was like, why am I working so? This is so much easier than I thought it would be. Everything.
Totally. That's how it goes, man. We always make things always seem harder in our heads, right? It's like, but then you just tackle the thing and you're like, damn, I wish I would have known that it was this easy the whole time.
I know. And you're like kicking yourself. You're like, damn it.
Totally.
All right, let's keep going here. So far the song's great. Love it. We've got almost 2 minutes left. Hell yeah. All right, here we go.
Oh, God.
All right, sorry, guitar solo. So I want to ask you 2 questions. Also, that riff with the slow cymbal in the background, that's sick. So I want to ask you 2 questions. The first is, when you do music videos, do you actually perform the vocals, even though it's not, you know, it's the mixed and mastered track that you put over it? Do you actually perform the vocals? Do you lip sync, or do you do a little bit of both? Because I know I always start off doing the vocals, and then like the 4th run through, I'm just like, man, I'm tired of being here. You know, what is it for you?
Oh, totally. I do the vocals as long as I possibly can. So I think on this music video we did, I want to say 3 passes through, and there were 2 cameras on me the entire time. So
wow,
I pretty much did vocals the entire time. Yeah. Because there are different like angles, you know, where they were shooting from, and yeah, so I try to do the vocals as much as possible. I don't really ever start lip syncing the entire song, but I like sometimes there'll just be parts where it's like I'm so like the adrenaline is going so crazily, and I'm just like, I gotta, you know, I'm just gonna fucking mouth this part. I just have to do it here. But for the most part, it's like, you know, I'm a pretty aggressive vocalist, and live you're going to experience an aggressive person, and I think that my aggression in vocals is best shown when I'm performing the video, or when I'm performing the song, when the video is being shot. Especially for this song. This song was meant to be a really aggressively emotional song, and you know, I specifically told David and Allie, who shot the video, My Good Eye Visuals, they're amazing. I told them that I wanted it to seem like a complete mental breakdown. And for that, I really needed to perform vocals the entire time to keep that like feeling going. So for this one's, I sang through the entire time.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. You know, I know what you mean, because like when we did our most recent music video, I'll be totally real. I got to the point where like we were in Canada. It was cold. We were all freezing, and I was just kind of over it. So I was just like, all the screams. Eventually at one point I did start lip syncing, but all the singing for the exact same reason. Well, for two reasons. Number one, I wanted the emotionality to be there. So I did all the singing, but also like people are going to notice if you don't have the right vowel shape. Like people are going to tell.
I know.
Now you mentioned how aggressive of a vocalist you are. And that actually leads me into the second question. I wanted to ask about your neck activation, because one thing I know is when I'm performing, I will often overperform, right? In actuality, like, you know, I'm able to hit my vocals, but that's boring. So I'm like, you know, like doing all this stuff. That and you know, just to be forthright, seeing the way that your neck contorts, normally I would be like, if I had a student, I'd be like, ooh, like let's look at that. However, as far as I know, you haven't had a whole lot of vocal issues, and you ain't having any problem activating your distortion. So I just kind of want to ask, is that something that like you're, and it's not a critique, by the way, because you're killing it. You're doing fine. Is that something that you add on performatively? Because I do know vocalists who do that. Or is that just kind of how it looks?
So this is funny because people ask me about this. And I understand it looks like sort of weird, but it has nothing to do with my vocals. My throat just looks like that. I can't change it. Like when I'm like aggressive, like just being silent, that's how my throat, that's how it looks. Like it looks like my muscles are kind of like strained, I guess, but it has nothing to do, like that is not, it's a separate thing from any vocals that are going on. So it's not that I'm doing it to add to the aggression. It's that when I'm doing this and I look aggressive and open my mouth like that, it's kind of the nature of the beast for me. And I just sort of look aggro.
Sure. Well, I mean, a couple things. First and foremost, like it looks cool. Like that's like it looks like you want your vocal performance to be emotional. That certainly adds a lot to it. And the second thing is, you know, one thing that I've learned, and I will straight up tell you, there are going to be people who totally disagree with this, and you know, what can you do? But one thing I've learned, and I've actually kind of changed my opinion on a little bit as I've been, you know, coaching, is that it is more, how do I say this? It's easier or more reliable to hear tension with your ear than to see tension in the neck sometimes.
Bingo.
Right? Sometimes.
You know, if someone is hurting their voice, you can hear that. It's not something that you can hear it necessarily going to see in their body, because like I was saying earlier, everyone's body is different, and the way that you look when you're like doing certain movements with your body is going to vary. So yeah, it's like I agree with you.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, for me, like I have to really work to make that happen, but it could be because I've got kind of a thick boy neck, you know, it's, you know, who's to say, but yeah, I think you're right. Like the fact of the matter is it looks cool. And like, I hear no strain. I've never been like, ooh, she's straining there. I've audibly, I've never.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because that is something that I wanted to talk about, because, you know, people, like I said, people will ask me about that, and yeah, it just has nothing to do with my voice.
Yeah. It's just, you know, it's just the way it is. Some things will never change. Sorry. Great song. All right, let's go ahead. I want to finish it out because I don't want to interrupt the outro. And then we'll talk about a couple more things, and then we'll probably wrap it up. But all right, here we go. Oh shit.
There we go.
There we go. So two things I've actually never noticed this about your voice before, but two things I noticed just now. Also, like, shout out to the abrupt ending. I love it.
Yes. There's a reason for that, but people won't know for a month. Why?
Never mind. I was gonna ask you what it was, but you know, but like I remember that it's interesting. We were talking about Veil of Maya earlier, but It's Not Safe to Swim Today. It still has one of my favorite song endings of all time. Boop, done. Yeah, so love that. Fade outs are cool. They're fine.
They are cool, but we don't like to do them too often, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But some things call for fade outs, but yeah, I agree. I like when a song ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, we just do long, drawn out shit all the time. But I know what you mean.
I'm such a sucker for I'm such a sucker for long, drawn out, epic stuff that fades out. I love that as well. But I like when it serves the song and it ends abruptly. I love that as well. I just don't like if you're doing like a fade out on every song. I think that like for a song and the song, you know, not a fade out on every song.
Yeah. You want to know like how neurotic I am? There have been times I've totally done this. I can't remember which songs, of course, because that's how it goes. But where I have bought the album specifically because like I don't want to listen. I need the actual audio file, and I'll take it into a DAW, and I'll either extend the end. I'll extend the outro, or I'll just be like, okay, we're just gonna loop this because I want to like live in that outro for 5 minutes, but it's only 30 seconds. Or there are other times where I'm like, man, I love this song. It just needs to end about 45 seconds earlier, and I want it to be abrupt, so I'll just like cut it, and like that's the version I listen to. That's awesome. I've totally done that before. Yeah, the two things that I noticed about your voice that I'm surprised I never noticed this because this is usually the main thing I think about. You don't seem to really shy away from certain vowels, right? Like a really common thing. I think some of the words you were saying were the edge. A lot of what you would have is the edge or the edge, right? But you were straight up saying the. And there was another word I don't remember what it was, but you were saying I, and E and I can be kind of difficult vowels because they're you know, the vocal tract is semi-occluded, right? Your tongue is up, you're narrowing that space. Mm-hmm. That can be difficult to work with the turbulence and the airflow of those vowels, right? Because not every vowel is created equal, right? They help and hinder different things, and that's a testament to the airflow. That's a testament to the breath control. Do you find yourself like, I did a lot in my early days, not so much now, but do you find yourself sort of like negotiating with vowels, like, oh, I really want to say this word, so I'm going to have to pronounce this as more of an or are you just like any vowel you want, you just crush it?
Yeah, I just kind of go for what I want. I mean, sometimes I'll like pronounce things weirdly, like, and I think, you know, someone who does this a lot is Johnny Davy, and Johnny is a big influence of mine. And Johnny has this awesome way of like, he'll do words like infestation, like that. Well, that was that was obviously not an impersonation of Johnny's voice. I don't know why I even did that, but he'll do devastation, you know, like stuff like that, and he'll mess around with words like that, and I like to do that sometimes if that's what the part calls for. If I want the word to be in a certain spot, but I think the pattern should be a little different, then I'll like freak a word in a different way. But, you know, I like to pronounce words. I like when people can pick up on things that I'm saying. I like that kind of vocal. That's, you know, Phil Bozeman, you can most of the time hear what Phil is like, just understand what Phil is saying without going to lyrics. And I really, really love that about his voice. I love when stuff is pronounced really well. And I kind of aim to pronounce words well so that people can kind of pick up on what I'm saying and what the song is about.
It's also very important for this, for y'all's music, because if you're like, you know, for me, like when it comes to like articulation, I only care as much as the song needs, you know what I mean? And if your pronunciation was sort of like slurry, like against like these like surgical drums, the guitar tone is very like totally. It would be a mess. It would sound terrible if you were slurring your words. So yeah, you've got to be really surgical. I love that you bring up Johnny Davy just because he is like one of my top 2 absolute favorite vocalists.
Oh, he's amazing.
I like everything he's ever done, but Sun Eater, I think that album like just
yeah, I love Sun Eater, and not to toot my own band's horn, but Naveen's solo album that he did, Flesh Rot, under the name Flesh Rot, with Johnny in 2010 is like one of my favorite metal records ever, and I just love Johnny's vocals on that. And yeah, Sun Eater is great. I mean, honestly, I'm down for everything that Johnny is on. He's a great vocalist, and he's a unique vocalist. You can tell when it's Johnny. He's a very powerful vocalist, and I just his voice is great.
It's amazing. And you know, I'm the same way. Like if he's on something, I'm into it. And by the way, the whole purpose of this video is you know, tooting your band's horn, pumping your band's tires. So feel free. Like I'm a big believer in that. Like if like, you know, I remember one time, I was talking to this guy. I was in a smaller local band, and I was like, "What's your favorite band?" And he's like, "My band." And I remember being like, "Fuck yeah, dude!" Yeah. Like that's.
I mean, isn't that awesome. The point? It's the point is to kind of take everything and make the stuff that you think is the best. You take what you think is the best from every other band, and you put it in your own band. If your band is not your favorite band, then you need to write stuff that makes your band your favorite band. Your band should be your favorite band. I wholeheartedly stand by that.
Yeah, at least top 5, right?
Yeah, at least top. Come on, at least top 5.
At least, I mean, I know, like, I love the work we do in Kardashev, but I also know that, like, for my own, like, one of our biggest influences is Lantloss and Alcest, and I just know, like, for me, they'll be a standard that they'll always be up there, and I'll always be climbing.
Oh, I know. I mean, it's like, I agree with you. On my dream tour, my band is still the opener. You know what I mean? Like all the bands that they're. It's like.
Well, now I got to know what's this dream tour? Who would you be playing?
I don't even know.
That's a juicy question.
That's so hard because I don't really know what my dream tour would be, but just because you're asking me right now, it's like whatever I say, I'm gonna disagree with myself after this. But
sure.
I don't know. There's just like a tour that I would love if a bunch of bands that I loved went on. Let's see, what would it be? This is what it would be. It would be Soul Niger. It would be Frederick Thorndahl playing Soul Niger Within. It would be Dying Fetus.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, it would 100%. It would be Cannibal.
Okay.
Despised Icon for sure.
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Hell yes.
I fucking see. That's another thing is I take large influence from Despised Icon, and I wanted to bring this up actually. You know, back when Despised Icon and all of those like bands were coming out around that time, it became kind of popular to have 2 vocalists in your band. And I remember there was a band that I joined where there were 2 vocalists before me. And when I heard like bands with 2 vocalists, I always thought, all right, I want to learn to do what both of the vocalists are doing so that I can sound like 2 vocalists in any band that I get into. And Despised Icon was a great influence. Alex Arian is one of my favorite vocalists. But yeah, those are just off the top of my head. There are like a million other bands that I'm sure I would put on that lineup. And I'm
sure.
I don't know. I'll think of them as we go.
I mean, that's a good lineup. That's a good starting. That's a great starting lineup. I mean, for me, if Cattle to Cap is playing, that's all I care. Everybody else, no matter. But Cattle to Cap is my favorite metal band probably ever. So good. Like if I ever could be 3% as good as Travis Ryan, I'd be so happy. He's insane, but he's incredible. Well, Absolute Zero is amazing. I'm really excited for people to. I'm most excited. I mean, most of the people who watch this video are going to know who you are. They're going to be familiar with you, what you do. But I'm really excited for the people who haven't heard your band yet, because I think this is a really cool entry point. I think a lot of the things that y'all do, you do well in this song, and I would encourage them to explore more Entheos. And that's actually a good segue into the plug. Let's go ahead and wrap it up here. Why don't you plug your podcast, plug your band, everything you want. This is your time to just tell people to shamelessly follow you and all that good stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah. Please check out the band. Follow us on all of the social media platforms. We're called Entheos. I do a podcast with Naveen, who is a member of Entheos. I talked about him a lot during this video. He is also my fiance. We have a podcast where we, sometimes interview people, sometimes just talk about what it's like to be in an underground, band and what that living that life is like. And it's called Copper Crabb Podcast. It's KOPERCRABB podcast. And yeah, we stream live on Twitch every Tuesday at 8:30 Central. And we post all of those the next day on Wednesdays on YouTube and Spotify and all of that stuff. So yeah, follow us on all the socials and get hip.
You know what, everybody, get hip. All
Get
right,
hip.
just get hip or get out.
Get hip.
Get hip or get out. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking some time. I know it's, fairly late for you. 8, 9, 10, 10. It's almost, oh geez, it's almost 11 p.m. I'm gonna let you get back to your life.
Thanks for having me. This is a pleasure. I love your band. You're a fantastic vocalist, so I was honored that you asked me to be on this. And thank you so much for having me. It was a fun time. Hopefully people enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. And with that, my friends, many thanks, much love.